Well, hello everyone, and thank you for once again joining the Generations Bible Study. My name is Ken Jobst, and we're here to continue a study of the book of Psalms that we have been engaged in over the last several weeks. I hope you've been enjoying them. Today, the psalm that's going to be the subject of our study is Psalm number 46. Psalm 46. Our study is called Psalms, the Heart of Worship. And today's psalm is familiar to many of us as the psalm that was the basis for the hymn by Martin Luther called "A Mighty Fortress Is Our God." That was the battle hymn of the Reformation. So it turns out that hymn is almost, wow, what would that be? It's almost 500 years old. And so just, tremendous hymn in the history of Christendom and in the history of the Protestant church. But this hymn, Psalm number 46, is a relatively short hymn, but it's broken into three particular stanzas. So for the structure of the hymn, we're going to see these stanzas are set off by the term Selah, S-E-L-A-H, Selah, which is an instruction to the musicians or to those who are, participating in the psalm, either by singing the psalm or hearing the psalm. The Selah means think about this, ponder this, reflect on what has just been said. Or another way to say it is meditate. So this relatively short psalm has three punctuations for us to stop and meditate on what has just been said. So let's take them in series. We'll take the first, the first three verses, and then we get a Selah, and then we get a Selah at the end of verse 7, and a Selah at the end of verse 11. So that's how we'll break it down as we approach Psalm number 46. Now, Psalm number 46 has a superscription. It has a title. And the title for Psalm 46 is "To the Chief Musician, a Psalm of the Sons of Korah." Now you know the sons of Korah were musicians in the tabernacle, musicians in the temple. So this is, to the chief musician, a psalm of the sons of Korah, a song for Alamoth. A song for Alamoth. Now, we don't really know what Alamoth means. It seems to be an instruction rather than a particular name. There are some people, the most common commentary that I've seen on this particular word is basically saying that it is a song for higher voices. So this might be a song that was designed for the sopranos, a song that was perhaps designed for sopranos and altos more than tenors, which is very interesting. It's very interesting when we see the content of this psalm that the psalmist instructed that it be sung by the sopranos and the altos. So, Psalm number 46, verse 1. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, even though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though its waters roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with its swelling. Selah. So there we pause at the very first, at the end of the third verse. We pause to consider what has just been said in this first stanza. Now, this first meditation, I'm going to break this psalm down into three meditations, three things for us to think about. And the first meditation is the meditation upon God as our refuge. God is our refuge. Now, what's a refuge? Another good word for refuge is sanctuary. God is the place where we can go. Now watch. It's not that we go to the sanctuary to hide, but we go to the sanctuary to be refreshed and rejuvenated and renewed. So God is our refuge and strength. God is a place that we can go for comfort and refreshment and renewal, but God is also the source of our strength. By the way, pay attention to the verb. God is our refuge. I mean, right now, God is our refuge and strength. It's not the kind of thing that you have to wait till later. It's not that God will be our refuge and strength, although that, God exists in eternity, and that's exactly true. God will be. God has been our refuge and our strength. But the psalmist is making the emphasis that God, right now, in this moment, in whatever circumstance you find yourself, God is our refuge and strength. Now, another thing that we need to, I want to give you a little heads up on, is in terms of historical context in the Bible, some of our Old Testament scholars, you may remember in the book of Deuteronomy, in Deuteronomy 19, there's the description of the cities of refuge. Now, cities of refuge were established in Israel. 3 cities on the west side of the Jordan, 3 cities on the east side of the Jordan, and they were established as cities where a manslayer could run to be preserved, right? To find ultimate refuge, right? So here was the illustration that's given. If you were out in the woods chopping wood and the head flew off your axe and it hit somebody else in the head, well, clearly you did not intend for that to happen. So yes, you had the axe, and yes, the head fell off the axe and it struck the other person, and they're dead, right? They are dead. So you are guilty of what we would call manslaughter, that it was not with malice aforethought, but it was indeed your agency caused that person's death. So by the law, you were subject to having taken someone else's life. So what you would need to do is to run to the city of refuge. Now in Israel, every intersection on every road had a sign on it that pointed to the city of refuge. And tampering with those signs was punishable by death. So if I committed manslaughter and I ran to the city of refuge, I would come into the city of refuge and meet with the leaders in the city of refuge, plead my case to them. So if the avenger of blood, which would have been the nearest male relative of the person who died, if the avenger of blood came after me to the city of refuge, then the leaders in the city of refuge would intercede, and they would be able to say, well, now wait a minute, this was an accident, so on and so forth. So revenge was not something that would have been made available because you went to the city of refuge. Now, you had to stay in the city of refuge. You had to stay in that city of refuge until the death of the high priest. So you may have to stay in that city of refuge for a long time, for years and years. But the notion was that you would be able to not be punished for an accident, right? So the notion here, if we put these two ideas together, we're saying that God is the city of refuge. God is the place for us to turn and to run to when we find ourselves in terrible situations. A very present help in trouble. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Now here, Christianity is a faith that balances a lot of paradoxes. And here's one of the core central paradoxes of the Christian faith, and it is this, that God is simultaneously, right, at the very same time, God is high and lifted up, so we call that transcendence, that God is transcendent. He is high above all. God is high above all. But while being transcendent, God is immanent, which means close. So God is high and lifted up, but God is also very close to us. Now, sometimes it can feel like God is immanent and in charge of everything, but not close. Sometimes it may feel as though God is close, but not immanent. God is immanent, but not transcendent. Well, how could that happen? Sometimes we feel friendly with God. We feel close to God, but we might not feel like God is in control of everything. We might feel like the world has, spun out of God's control, when we know that that's not the case. So God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, verse 2 says, therefore, we will not fear, even though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, and though its waters roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with its swelling. Selah. Right? Think about that. Now, I'm reading from the New King James Version. And in the New King James Version, the word though is like compounded. So from verse 2, even though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried, and though the waters roar, and though the mountains shake. Right? So the idea is this stair-step increasing, all these things can be happening, and still we will not fear, because God is our refuge and strength. Though the earth be removed. Right? How could the earth be removed? Well, like if there's a landslide and the earth slips out from under you, still, there's no need to fear. Though the mountains be carried to the midst of the sea. This is the California verse of the Bible, right? That California is going to slide into the ocean one day, as the mystics and statistics say it will, to quote Warren Zevon. And though its waters roar, though the waters roar and be troubled, which gives us a picture of being on a boat in the ocean in a storm, right? Even though in a time of storm, we won't fear. If the earth slips out from under us, we won't fear. If the mountains get thrown into the sea, we will not fear. Though the mountains shake with its swelling. There's some folks who are critics of the Bible who would say, mountains don't swell. Well, okay, watch. If you're a geologist and you know anything about Mount St. Helens that blew up 40 years ago, right? What happened before it blew up? Well, the mountain, got, as they would say, all swole. It got bigger on the north face of the mountain before it blew up. So though the mountains shake with its swelling, even if a mountain blows up, Mount St. Helens blew up. By the way, 1,600 years before Christ, so 1600 BC, there was an island in the Aegean Sea, an island off the coast of Greece called Thera. And Thera was a volcano that exploded. And you could hear the explosion as far away as Jerusalem. It was a cataclysmic explosion. And today, you can go to what remains of that island, which is now called Santorini, and it's in the Aegean. It's actually a very, very popular vacation spot, a beautiful Aegean island. But back in 1600 BC, it exploded with the force of, 1,000 times of Mount St. Helens. Now, so there's some points I want to lift up here about this very first meditation, the meditation on God being our refuge. The first thing is we're going to see this theme get repeated in the other two stanzas as well. The notion of God being our refuge, that God is our protection. Secondly, the notion of God's presence is also going to be reflected in both of the other meditations that make up this psalm as well. But one thing I want to really emphasize is the use of plural pronouns throughout Psalm number 46. God is not just my refuge and strength. God is our refuge and strength. Verse 2 says, therefore, we will not fear. This is not just about me and my alone experience of God. This is a reflection of a community. And in American culture, we are so individualistic, we quite often lose sight of what it means to be in community together, in community with one another. And oh my goodness, in this particular season of division, right, we need to reclaim an understanding of what Christian community is all about. What does it mean to be in something together? Even if you don't agree with everybody about what to think or what even to understand is going on, what does it mean to be together? So the plural first-person pronouns in this psalm are tremendously important. So whenever we see the word we or our or us throughout the psalm, it's an emphasis on the community of believers. As a matter of fact, the only time the first-person singular pronoun is used, which is the word I, the only time the word I is used is when God is using it. So it's very interesting in this psalm. God is the only I. And the rest of us are referred to as the us, the we, the our. Oh, that's very powerful. Very powerful. So, God's presence and God's protection are the two things that are emphasized in every one of the stanzas of this particular psalm. Now, let's look at Psalm number 2. We've looked at Psalm number 1, that God is our refuge and our strength. So the first meditation is on God as refuge. What does it mean for God to be my sanctuary, my place that I can run to in trouble and find protection, right? God is my refuge. Secondly, the second stanza has to do with the river. There, verse 4, there is a river whose streams shall make glad the city of God, the holy place of the tabernacle of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God shall help her just at the break of dawn. The nations raged, the kingdoms were moved. He uttered his voice, and the earth melted. The God of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Selah. Now, once again, want to focus on this notion of the river. There is a river whose streams shall make glad the city of God. Now, where's the city of God? The city of God is Jerusalem. And as a matter of fact, refers in the next line, the holy place of the tabernacle of the Most High, which is just being said to emphasize that we're talking about Jerusalem, and we're talking about this particular river. Verse 5 says that God is in the midst of her, right? That the temple, or God's dwelling place with humanity, God's temple is in the midst of Jerusalem. She shall not be moved. God shall help her just as the break of dawn. Now this is continuing our theme of community, right? the community here is God's people in Jerusalem. We might think of it as God's church today. But there's a river whose streams, there's a river. Ezekiel speaks of the river that flows from the Holy of Holies, and that's kind of the idea that's here. And in Ezekiel's vision, the river started out, ankle deep, and then it gets knee deep, and it becomes a river that nobody can even walk across. You got to swim in it. It becomes so plentiful. But its source is God. It's a river whose source is God. What do rivers do? Right? Rivers bring water, and the water brings refreshment. The water brings life, right? Because the plants grow and animals can come and get a drink. So rivers are tremendously important. And it's so remarkable that the only major city on earth that I can think of that is not served by a river, major city, right? Not served by a river, is Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem is on a mountaintop. Jerusalem is in a high place. So how can a river go through a high place? Well, it does so because its source, right? Metaphorically, its source is the Holy of Holies. So the river of refreshment and renewal, the river of life for you and I begins, you and me, pardon me, for you and me begins in the tabernacle of God. God is in the midst of her. By the way, these pronouns, God is in the midst of her, she shall not be moved, right? Those are collective pronouns that are referring to the community. When we say her and she, we're talking about Jerusalem, personifying the city as a woman. But still, we're talking about a group of people together. We're not talking about individual, single people. We're talking about a group of people, even though we're using that collective feminine pronoun. God shall help her just at the break of dawn. You know what? When is it darkest? It is darkest just before dawn, right? So things in our lives can be going in difficult directions, but God is ready to break through. He shall help her just at the break of dawn. And it says, the nations raged and the kingdoms were moved. He uttered his voice, right? And the earth melted. This is God uttering a voice. It's so remarkable to me that the Bible is centered around sound more than sight. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. We are a faith that is not so much focused on the things that we see, because you can only see the surface of something. Right here, I've got a book, right? This is a book, a little, I call it a commonplace book. It's a book that I keep some notes in. By sight, all you can see is composition book, right? You don't see what's in it. I could sit here and read it to you, and you would hear, and then you would know what's in it. Sight only gives the surface. It's speech, it's hearing that allows us to get to the depth of something. So he uttered his voice, and the earth melted. Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! So this river, this is a river that makes glad the city of God. And by the way, what does it mean to make something glad? Well, it for something to make me glad, it brings satisfaction. It brings wholeness, right? Or, to use the Hebrew word, it brings shalom. It brings peace. Now, so the first meditation is the meditation of the refuge. The second meditation is the meditation of the river. And now we come to the third meditation. The third meditation is a meditation upon the ruler. From Psalm 46, verse 8. Come, behold the works of the Lord, who has made desolations in the earth. He makes wars to cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and cuts the spear in two. He burns the chariot in the fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Selah. So that's the third stanza, the third and final stanza of Psalm number 46. It focuses on the ruler. And the instruction for us is to be still and know that I am God. By the way, we know the word ruler. If you're at school and you need a ruler, what are you generally talking about? Well, you're talking about something that's going to be able to measure short distances, right? So a 1 foot ruler. Now, watch this. What does that ruler do? I mean your measuring stick, your 1 foot long ruler. It sets the standard, right? A ruler that is a sovereign should be the one who sets the standard for the kingdom or for the community, right? So watch this. Come behold the works of the Lord. He has made desolations in the earth. Now, he makes wars to cease to the ends of the earth, breaks the bow, cuts the spear in two, burns the chariot in fire. So all of this to say, we may have our squabbles. We may have wars and rumors of wars. But the psalmist gives us an invitation. He says, look, come and behold the works of the Lord. God can make some wars cease. You know, the weather sometimes can make wars cease. You know what? I read one of the most fascinating books that I think in years and years, most fascinating book. And it was a military history of mud. A military history of mud. How battles and wars were won or lost around the notion of mud. And this book goes into so much detail about different kinds of mud and how mud, for example, in World War II in the Pacific, or in World War I, right? Battles, the trench warfare and mud, and how the mud slowed down supply chains and slowed down advances, and how different armies took advantage and were hindered by mud. Now, let me ask you, who makes mud? Right? So the weather, right? God can make a war to cease by bringing, by bringing a cold winter to Moscow, by bringing rains, by making it impossible to have warfare because of the weather. Now, come behold the works of the Lord, who has made desolations in the earth. He makes wars to cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and cuts the spear in two and burns the chariot in the fire. Be still and know that I am God. Right? So all this activity that God can do to exhibit the supreme and superlative strength of anything conceived of. Verse 10 says, what do we need to do? We need to be still and have knowledge that God truly is God. You know, there's a little difference between our common use of the term belief and the word knowledge. It's one thing to believe it'll rain. It's another thing to know it's raining. Right? And what the psalmist is saying here is not so much, think about, believe God, but the psalmist is saying, you better know something about God. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. The nations may not want to exalt me right now, But the day is coming when I will be exalted among the nations, says God. I will be exalted in the earth. Now, God gives us a choice. And the choice is this. We can choose to exalt God, which means to lift God up. We can exalt God right now, or we can wait for when Jesus comes back. When every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of the Father, right? So the choice is yours, and I recommend today, right, as being the day to exalt the Lord. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Now, that phrase is used twice, right? It's used at the closing of the second stanza. It's used at the closing of the third stanza. They're both times exactly the same words. Both times they are punctuated with a Selah, which means sit and think about that for a minute. Now watch. The Lord of hosts is with us. We've already talked about the plural, is with us as a community. The Lord of hosts. What hosts are we talking about? We're talking about the heavenly hosts, which means the God's armies, right? The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob. Now, where was Jacob? Jacob was on earth, right? So we've got heaven, the Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob, God who is present with us walking around here on earth. The God of Jacob is our refuge, Selah. So what this is saying is that God in heaven and on earth, God who is transcendent and God who is immanent, is with us. For the presence of God to be with us. Now here's something interesting, and the Bible never sets out to prove the existence of God to us. That the whole idea of the proof of the existence of God, talking about the ontological proof of the existence of God and the teleological proof of the existence of God, all of that is a reflection of Greek philosophy, right? And it's basically philosophical. Pardon my use of this term, but philosophical gamesmanship, right? And so often we get the image, or I entertain the notion of philosophy as kind of like a parlor amusement, where yes, let's all go, sit in the parlor and sip an adult beverage of some sort and ponder all of these things. So that's the notion of philosophy that has kind of stuck with me. The Bible never sets out to prove formally the existence of God. The existence of God is taken as a given in the Bible. It doesn't set out to prove something that the Bible takes to be self-evident, that there is a God. So the knowledge that we're talking about here, be still and know that I am God, refers to a deeply personal knowledge, right? It means it's more than just intellectual assent to the notion that there must exist a supreme mover, a first cause. No. What we're saying is you need to know God as a person. Not somebody that you heard of somewhere, not something that you might recognize or see occasionally, but a person with whom you have developed a relationship and a knowledge of. All right? So this is Psalm number 46. Psalm 46, the basis of that wonderful Reformation hymn, A Mighty Fortress is Our God, which came, let's see here, what was that? That probably came out, once again, I said like 500 years ago. I think it was around 1527, I think is the year that hymn came along, 1527. So in another 7 years or so, we'll be looking at a 500-year-old hymn. You know what? I dearly love Psalm 46. It says a lot in a very short amount of time. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Be still and know that I am God. Those are verses that we should have on our memory list. We should be able to memorize those verses, teach those verses to our children. So Psalm 46 is a very important psalm for us to own and to corporately, that is, as a body, to embrace this psalm. Now, I want to put a little break in here, because we have studied this psalm, and now I want to talk about one of the most unusual Bible trivia thing. Yeah, a little point of Bible trivia that is centered upon this psalm. And before I even begin, I just got to say, this is one of the coolest little Bible trivia points that I've ever encountered. But while I say that, I want to say, don't make too much of this, because this is kind of a parlor game thing, right? But this is Psalm number 46, and I'm going to ask you to do something. In Psalm number 46, not including the superscription, not including that piece that says, to the chief musician, a psalm of the sons of Korah, a song of Alamoth. Set that aside. But begin in verse 1, and in verse 1, in the King James Version, it also works in the New King James Version, but get the King James Version or the New King James Version, start in verse 1 of Psalm number 46, and start counting the words. Count each word. God, 1, is 2, our, 3, refuge, 4, right? So count the words beginning in verse 1, okay? Count down until you have counted 46 words. I'll give you a minute, right? Okay, Psalm 46, beginning in verse 1, God is our refuge and strength. Start counting those words. Count off 46 words. So I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30, 1, 2, 3, 4, 35, 36, 37, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46. What, did you get the same word I got? The 46th word of the 46th Psalm, counting from verse 1, the 46th word from the 46th Psalm is the word shake. Shake, right? Okay, all right, fair enough. So what, Pastor Ken? Well, now watch this. Go to the end of the Psalm. Go to the very end of the Psalm. And set aside the word Selah, because that's not actually part of the Psalm, that's part of the musical instruction, right? So we're going to set it aside. And then from the very last word of the Psalm, I want you to count backwards, this time, 46 words, right? So I'm going to start at the word refuge. Refuge, 1, our, 2, is, 3, Jacob, 4, right? I want you to count 46 words up from the bottom, apart from that Selah, because remember, that Selah is a musical notation. That's not really a word. Okay, 46 words. Ready? Go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 21, 22, 30, 34, 36, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46. Circle that word. What's that word? 46 words from the bottom is spear. Breaks the spear into. Wait, now wait a minute. 46 words from the top is the word shake. 46 words from the bottom is the word spear. Shake, spear. Psalm 46, 46 words from the bottom, 46 words from the top, 46 words from the top, shake, 46 words from the bottom, spear. Shakespeare. Psalm 46. In 1611, which is the year the King James Bible was published, William Shakespeare was 46 years old. Okay, for real. I love that. I just absolutely love that. Psalm 46, 46 words from the top, 46 words from the bottom. The two words put together, you get Shakespeare. And in 1611, look it up. Go ahead, don't take my word for it, look it up. In 1611, William Shakespeare turned 46 years old. Now, this is a pure coincidence, right? This is purely coincidental. When you've got a document the size of the Bible, right, with like over 600,000 words in that document, you can't help but have some coincidences that are really going to tickle you somewhere in there. Now, I'm just saying, and I want you to know this. I want you to know this, that as a playwright in 1611, William Shakespeare would have had absolutely nothing to do with the ecclesiastical scholars who were responsible for the translation of the King James Bible. I mean, they're just two completely separate worlds, and no. The translation committee of the King James Bible was not doing William Shakespeare an honor by translating it this way. It's purely coincidental. But please go ahead and file this under unusual things you know about the Bible. Clearly, it's the most unusual Bible trivia point you're ever going to find. Well, that's Psalm 46. I hope you've enjoyed it. I enjoy Psalm 46, and it's a tremendous comfort to each and every one of us to remember and know that God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Hey, until next time, stay blessed, stay strong. God bless you. We will see you very, very soon. Thanks for being a part of this. We'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye-bye.